I'll just ask that everyone place themselves on mute unless you want to speak, and then obviously you can unmute yourself. But in the interim, if everyone places themselves on mute, that would be great. We are now live. Chairman, if you'd like to bring us to order.
My name is Ben Chandler. I am presently the chairman of the State Board of Elections here in Kentucky, and I'd like to call the June 3rd, 2020 special meeting of the Kentucky State Board of Elections to order. To start, I would like to take roll of the board members, and I will start as I see you all on the screen. Of course, we're having this by Zoom, and we welcome anybody who is watching live on YouTube, any members of the public who are watching these proceedings. We are on Zoom because of the COVID-19 situation. I think we've been through that explanation on several occasions, but we have a nice turnout today of folks who are involved, including some new people who I will introduce in just a minute. But first, I'll take roll. Sherry Whitehouse.
Sherry Whitehouse, Bullitt County, member.
James Lewis.
James Lewis.
Oh, there you go.
James Lewis, retired county clerk.
George Russell.
Yes, George Russell, member, Franklin County.
Katrina Fitzgerald.
Katrina Fitzgerald, retired county clerk.
Deanna Brangers.
Deanna Brangers, member, Jefferson County.
Corey Skolnick.
Corey Skolnick, member, Jefferson County.
And Dwight Sears.
Dwight Sears, member, Pulaski County.
Excellent. We've got a full complement of board members with us today. We also have several guests. Excuse me. Our last board member, who is, of course, our Secretary of State, Michael Adams. Mr. Secretary, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Secretary of State Michael Adams, present, non-voting member.
Wonderful. We have several guests from the County Clerks organization. We have our president, Renisa Adams from Henderson County. We've got Gabrielle Summy from Kenton County. We also have Don Blevins with us from Fayette County. And I believe we've got Bobby Holtzclaw from Jefferson County on the phone. Welcome to all of you. We also have with us our executive director, Jared Deering, our assistant director, Karen Sellers, our general counsel, Taylor Brown, and our secretary, Sheila Walker. We have as well Luke Morgan with us, who is outside counsel for the board, and we'll be hearing from him in executive session a little later. The first order of business on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the May 19th, 2020 meeting. I'm sure everybody's had a chance to review the minutes, and I will, does anybody have any changes they want to make? Well, I will tell you that in paragraphs 8 and 10, there are a couple of typos. So hopefully we can get those fixed, but they don't change the content of the minutes, and the content of the minutes are just fine as far as I'm concerned. So I will accept a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion.
A motion from member Whitehouse. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from member Brangers. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are approved.
I'll make sure the board secretary goes back to make those edits, and that I'll resend that out to everyone as well to make sure that you can see if they were just typographical changes and then no content was changed.
Excellent, thank you. The next item on the agenda is ratification of County Board of Election replacements pursuant to KRS 117.035. Director Deering, would you like to address those, please, sir?
Certainly, these are typical changes that are made on a regular basis for all the counties. We have board members that are stepping off, stepping on, being reappointed. These ones specifically are from Caldwell and Lyon counties. By historical note, we take the name off the top of the list. They provide us 5 names from the party chair that are submitted to the county and the state board of elections. And like I said, by tradition, we take the name off the top of the list.
And we've got 2 counties, Caldwell and Lyon.
Mhm.
Do we have a motion to approve?
And these are, this is a ratification of staff approval.
Right. Do we have a motion to approve to ratify?
So moved.
A motion by member Brangers. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Russell. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, the moves in Caldwell and Lyon County by the staff have been ratified. The next item is for our guest county clerks to give us a little testimony as to what they're doing in their counties for the June 23rd election and why. And as we know, we're having an unusual election in June. First of all, the Secretary of State Adams, and the governor decided to move the election because of the health crisis that we've been facing here in Kentucky, COVID-19, largely because we were concerned about the folks who had to administer the election, the voters who would show up for the election, and particularly the difficulty of getting poll workers who tend to be some of the more vulnerable older citizens in our society. Because of all those concerns, the election was moved to June 23rd. And as we also have discussed, we have changed the manner of the election. And this election will hopefully primarily be an election held by absentee vote or vote by mail, or as I've heard some people refer to it, vote at home. And we hope to get as many people to take that option as we can, because under the circumstances that exist in this unique situation, we believe that that's the safer approach. And I want to compliment the 120 county clerks that we have in the Commonwealth of Kentucky for their willingness to step up and try to make this a successful election. They face very difficult circumstances that nobody's ever conducted an election like this in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And we all want to work together to try to make sure that it's successful. And today we have with us the county clerks from the largest 3 counties in Kentucky. The main purpose of this special meeting is to approve the plans that the clerks have come up with as to how their elections will be managed in their counties. And we thought that it would be a good idea for the clerks, some of the clerks in particular, those in our 3 largest counties, to give us some indication of what they're going to do and why, so the public can understand exactly why the election is being held the way it is in those particular counties. Who would like to go first?
I think we have Clerk Blevins on the docket first, and then Clerk Holzclaw, and then Clerk Suing.
All right, Don Blevins Jr., fire away.
Good morning, everyone. In Fayette, we're going to have primarily vote by mail, as you said, Chairman Chandler. The other forms that you all will be interested in will be done in the following way. For our citizens that want to vote in person by appointment, I've made arrangements to use our senior center here in Lexington. It's very well suited to disabled access. And so those style of voters are best suited at that location. We're doing all of our appointments at this one location. We're trying to encourage the public not to use that unless you have a particular reason for using that location, and reserve it for our community, our people in our community that have disabilities. So far, that's working out very well. We're getting very few requests, and I feel confident that that's going to work very well. For in-person voting on election day, we've made arrangements to host that in one location at Commonwealth Stadium, now called Kroger Field. On the backside of the stadium, we've made arrangements to have dual lines coming in 2 different gates that will then serpentine inside the building so that people are protected from the rain should it rain on election day. Again, though, we are discouraging the public from doing that because the whole reason that we're hosting this election, vote at home, I really like that phrase, that's a great phrase, is to avoid contact with each other and a resurgence of the COVID infection rates. So we're trying to at least with our publicity here in Lexington, we're pushing hard for people to get their ballots via the mail. Just to give you a quick update, I thought you all might like to hear some numbers. This morning, when we rolled in, we stand at about 46,000 ballots requested and about 21,000 yet to be delivered to voters. I imagine that a lot of county clerks are doing similar to what I'm doing. We have kind of a unique problem. Even though most of the office is non-essential, the only part of the office that could be deemed essential is the recording department for deeds and mortgages, but everything else really is kind of non-essential. However, the non-essential side of the business is also what makes the payroll. So a lot of the smaller counties in particular are really struggling because they have to keep doing their motor vehicle activities, as do I, in order to bring in the fee revenue to make payroll. So it's kind of an awkward, difficult time to have your office both open and doing your normal activities, but also you really have a strong desire to redeploy your staff and have them help with the election. So for example, this week, Monday and Tuesday, my motor vehicle people were doing their motor vehicle things. Today, every one of them has been converted into election officers. And so, not literally, but figuratively. So they're going to help stuff ballots and get them out to the voters. I estimate that I can do somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 ballots a day once I redeploy staff like that. In addition to the staff I have here, we've hired 12 true election workers that are out at my warehouse, which is where our ballot processing committee will be held. We're live streaming that via YouTube whenever we meet in order to be compliant with the open meetings law. We've also made arrangements for observers to be able to physically attend with social distancing and so forth, and masks and all that provided. Let's see. I think that probably covers it. I'll pause here and see if you have questions.
Anybody have any questions? Anybody on the board have any questions for Clerk Blevins?
I do, if I could ask a question.
Sure, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clerk Blevins, thanks for being with us today. I'm really glad to have the clerks from the 3 biggest counties talking about these election plans. So first, I also want to say what a great job you've done in Lexington with encouraging absentee voting. From the numbers that I've seen, 18% of the registered voters in Fayette County have requested an absentee ballot. That's one of the highest proportions in the whole state. There's only maybe 2 or 3 counties with a higher rate than that. So my guess is that proportionally speaking, we'll have fewer people voting in Fayette. And that's, I think, good for everybody voting in person in Fayette. I mean, to say that's probably best for everyone to avoid long lines and potential transmission of virus. I did want to ask, though, how many folks are you estimating are going to vote in person? And logistically, how many do you think you can handle with one voting location?
Well, first of all, I want to explain, I forgot to explain why we chose to do one location. It's my firm belief that if I had, say, 5 locations, people would use them. And if you've been going to the grocery like I have, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not social distancing. Not everyone's wearing masks. It's a very dangerous situation to try to bring a bunch of people into one spot or even 5 spots, because they'll do it if you make it available. So I opted to just go with one location. We opted to use the stadium because of traffic flow and parking. It's nearly ideal for what we're about to try. We've got 2 lines set up to where I can hold about, I'm estimating 100, maybe 50 to 100 in each line as they go separately. So that can stay comfortably under the stadium and yet social distance. In terms of estimate for how many people we can get through, I'm thinking between 5,000 and 7,500.
So 5,000 to 6,500 in the span of 12 hours on election day. That doesn't count early voting, right?
No, it does not.
Okay, thanks.
For overall numbers, just to give you some perspective, 4 years ago, we voted 60,000 people in person during a primary that actually was contested. This primary is largely uncontested, as you all know. So it's very surprising to me to have already 46,000 ballots requested. In terms of estimated voter turnout, I've been planning for about 100,000, but I have capacity to handle 120,000 ballots. If we go north of 120,000, I'll get in a little bit of trouble because my extra capacity is maxed out at that point. 120,000 is 50% turnout, just so you have some perspective.
Anybody else have any questions for Clerk Blevins? All right, I'd like to turn the floor over to our county clerk from Jefferson County, Kentucky's largest county, Bobby Holzclaw, to explain what she's doing in Louisville. Clerk Holzclaw, are you with us?
It looks like she may be on mute, so I don't know if she's
Yeah,
talking.
I think.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
Clerk Holzclaw, you're recognized.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Chandler. Jefferson, well, what can one say? I will agree with most everything that Clerk Blevins has said. So I will kind of start out just with some numbers. The turnout in 2016 for the presidential primary was 24% in Jefferson County, which was approximately 139,000 votes that were cast. And based on that last presidential primary turnout, we are really preparing right now to accommodate 30,000 voters at the Kentucky Exposition Center. Let me just say that much thought has been put into this. What is best for everybody? And you know, you can't really come up with one solution. But now that I look back on it, when we made this decision, it was the best decision. It is, what I can tell you is it would be impossible to have more voting locations out there than the one big one. For one thing, financially, we couldn't do it. Personnel-wise, we would not be able to do it for a number of reasons, for the safety of the voter, for the safety of the employees. One location is all that we can handle. I think I don't know how many of you know, but Jefferson County at this point, we have over 2,200 ballot size. And you just can't just put those out there, as you all well know. Over 2,000 ballot styles is a huge amount. We decided to put at the location that we're going to, because of those ballot styles, because of the parking, because of all of the requirements for safety, for the ADA requirements, for the election officers. It is massive here, and we are dealing with not just the virus, but we're also dealing with the rats that are going on in Jefferson County. We've already had to send them home early. I can't even begin to tell you all what a challenge this is for us. We have extended our in-person voting at the Fayette Exposition Center. We're going to start early voting out there on June the 15th through the 23rd. And that means that there's no appointment necessary. All they have to do is go out there and vote. And of course, we'll still be having our location at the election center will be open that time too. We do encourage most people, just like Clerk Blevins said, to try not to use that, because we're trying to keep that for people who have special needs, and their equipment and all will be set up there, and that will be by appointment. Let me just say that right now we have asked for around 160. We're trying to get 160 election officers, and we've requested about 150 from the National Guard. But due to the recent problems here in the city, we've only been able to confirm 50 members of the National Guard. We've also had to incur the expense of 3 locations now for security. And we'll tell the board, as you all well know, all of these things are quite expensive. On election day, we will have 36 scanners at the Exposition Center, 200 e-poll books, and this morning alone, we have over 47,000 requests in the portal. The phones, I have 12 operators that are all they're doing all day long is answering phones. I have 4 to 6 people every day on the bold chat. We're doing everything possible here, but there is no phone system that can be gotten that will handle these number of calls that are coming through. I hope the board knows that all of these decisions were made for the best for everybody. Whether we're successful or not, I don't know. Nobody knows, because nobody's ever had to do this. I pray that we're all successful. I'll tell you, in my own personal feelings, all 120 county clerks are giving it their all. And truthfully, if this was going to be a mail-in ballot type election, we should have been prepared for this a year ago. There is no way in a matter of 3 weeks, with the details that we have, that we are able to get all of this done. I worry continuously about all of these last-minute requests, and they come in at the last minute. There is no way anybody's got the staff to handle that. I want you to know that I look at this as a challenge and an opportunity to be a part of history, because this is history being made. And I'm very fortunate to have that opportunity. But to be able to do this, I can't sit here and tell everyone that it's going to work great. We're doing the best any humans could possibly do. I have a staff now that comes in at 8 in the morning, and they are there to, well, a lot of them come in at 7 actually, and they are staying there until 9 o'clock at night. I mean, I'm running 2 full-time shifts of people to try to help, and it's still a very difficult situation. If there's any questions you have, I'll be glad to answer them. I don't know of any other things that need to be said. I just truly believe that while nobody knows if it's going to work, I do believe there is no way we could have had more than 1 polling location.
Well, Clerk Holsclaw, thank you very much for that explanation, and thank you for all of the effort that you and your staff are making. And I think you're exactly right. We've got the clerks and their staffs in 120 counties in this Commonwealth who are trying heroically to make this a successful election in very difficult circumstances and on a very short time frame. So we are greatly appreciative of all of the effort that you're putting forth. And all of these 120 counties, I might add, have different circumstances. Anybody who knows anything about Kentucky knows that all 120 of our counties are very different. And you as county clerks know a whole lot more about the particular circumstances that you have to deal with in your own county than the members of the board do. And that's why we have asked you all to determine how your election would be run in your county. And we appreciate all of the different plans that you've come up with. Does anybody have a question for Clerk Holsclaw?
Mr. Chairman, I have one question.
Yes, Mr. Russell.
The parking fee, has that been waived at the fairgrounds?
There will be no parking fees.
Thank
Even
you.
the whole week before the election, they will be able to park free.
Thank you.
We are breaking, when they go in the convention, in there, they will have, everything's going to be broke down into LDs. So we can eliminate some time of trying to get to the right ballots.
And as,
Yes,
I know postcards are still being delivered in Jefferson County. Is your volume picking up in the last couple of days?
it picks up every day. Every day. When we go home at night, we have no idea what we'll find in the morning. Like I said, this morning we're sitting there with over 47,000 in the portal.
Okay.
It is I realize across the country there are much bigger counties, but for the number of staff that we have, it was never prepared for anything like this. And as Mr. Blevins also said, the offices have to keep going. I can't pull everybody to do the election. There's still car registrations, there's still mortgages, there's still deeds. And I don't want to feel like the doom and gloom person. I'm just trying to give you the reality of all of it. And I would welcome anybody that would want to come and visit our election center and see how well and how hard they're trying. They're certainly welcome to do so. One other thing I would like to say, it is really difficult for all of us. And I want to thank Jared and his staff and the state board because they've tried to do everything humanly possible to help us. But they are like us. Nobody has anything to look back on and be able to say, well, this is what worked and what didn't work. And so for the short amount of time, I think everyone has tried their level best to work together. And I thank you all so much for that. One little note I would like to bring up. It is hard for me. I don't speak for any other clerks, but when you have your own elected officials out saying, well, they should have done this or they should have done that, instead of, that already sets the tone. Instead of everybody saying, look, we can get this done, you're going to be able to do it in your home, and I like that term also, and encourage people. Don't encourage them to already dislike it. They're not happy with it already. But please don't add that fuel to that fire. And I'm not necessarily saying the board by any means, but I'm saying in my own county, we have issues with our own people who do not, truthfully, they've never been a poll worker, nor have they ever visited the election center. I'm asking that they stop with all of this doom and gloom and give us an opportunity to do what is right. End of my speech, and I want to thank everyone again for the opportunity today. And if you have any questions, our phones are terribly busy. It's extremely difficult to get through, but please use the bold chat, anything, or call me personally, and I will try to guide and help you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Clerk Holsclaw. And I think it would be useful to point out again that the reason, one of the central reasons that every clerk is having to deal with this circumstance is because of the difficulty of finding poll workers and keeping those poll workers safe. That's
And
something that needs to be pointed out again.
And you know, I get these responses, well, I'll be a poll worker. Well, when you call them, and I'll get people, and then when you call them, they have two. And not that I regret or that bothers, they only have two, but we're going to have close to 200. And right now, we've had 40 people reply that they're willing to do it out of a pool of probably 3,000. On a normal election, we have to have 2,500 poll workers.
I think it's extremely important for the public to understand that central problem of what we're dealing with. Every clerk is having a real challenge in finding poll workers, and it makes perfect sense that you would, because most poll workers historically have been older Kentuckians, and they are amongst the more vulnerable people in our society, and they don't want to expose themselves, nor do we want them to be exposed.
I totally agree with you. It's a tremendous responsibility. And again, I will tell you, I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity, but it is very difficult. And I know all 120 of these county clerks are exhausted. They're working hours and hours and hours, and then you top that with the pressure and worry of it not going well. It is very difficult.
Well, thank you very much. Anybody else want to ask a question of Clerk Holzclaw?
Chairman Chandler, if I could.
Yes, Director Deering.
So one thing I think, and Clerk Holzclaw, I don't want to add words to your speech, but I think one thing that you said I think was really important for the board to understand is you said that you would be breaking it up by legislative district or LD district. I think it's important to understand that when voters come into the exposition center, they will have, while it's encompassed into one area, from what I've been told from Jefferson County's deputies and Clerk Holzclaw, is that it'll actually be centered around 18 different polling locations within the one center. They will have individuals that will be able to direct voters into those specific lines. So it won't be one line where everyone will have to get in.
No.
Wait their turn.
No.
That's an important.
There will be numerous lines to try to keep it moving.
Yes, and I think that's, for me, that was, I was greatly encouraged when I was told that, and I think it's an incredibly creative solution that Clerk Holzclaw has come up with that will be able to make sure that when people are coming in, that they'll be able to break up into smaller lines, and that even if someone ends up in the wrong line, because they are at that one location and they have so many disparate ballot faces and ballot styles, if they get into the wrong line, it's my understanding, Clerk Holzclaw, that you'll have runners to be able to go grab the correct ballot face, run it back to them. So while you'll be pushing people into the correct lines, if for whatever reason someone ends up in the wrong line, you'll still be able to help process them effectively.
That is correct.
All right, thank you very much. Let's hear now from.
Sorry, could I ask a question?
Oh, sure, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. A couple comments. First, kind of a general comment, and then a comment about Jefferson County. First of all, the question, I do like 5 or 6 Zooms a day with media, civic organizations, and so forth. And the first question I get is, why in the world are you all reducing the number of polling locations when the goal here is to avoid crowds? That's a great question. And I want to clarify for the press watching and the voters watching, that's not a feature of what we're doing. That's a bug. That's something that we're working around. It's not something that we've desired as an outcome. It's something that's been necessitated by what Clerk Holzclaw just described in Jefferson County. We don't have the poll workers. If you don't have poll workers, you don't have locations. It takes 15,000 poll workers to put on a regular election. I testified in the legislature last year before I was Secretary of State that we have a poll worker crisis already, and that was before coronavirus. So I'm not saying I necessarily agree with one location in every single county that's offered just one location, but as a general principle, we have to have a significant reduction in the number of locations. And it's not as a proactive measure, it's a reality that we had to accept and then work around. Big difference there. Second point is, as I said, I'm really happy to have the 3 biggest counties represented here telling us about their logistical challenges. And I think what's really helpful about remarks we've had, and we'll get more in a minute, is I want the public and the press to understand what it actually takes to run an election. There's a real disconnect, a real lack of public comprehension of what goes into planning and orchestrating an election. It's a very complicated procedure, especially under the circumstances. It's so hard to even have training for your poll workers when you can't have groups of people together. And so as hard as this is in a normal situation, it's 5 times as hard right now under these circumstances. And to Jefferson's specifically, I've known Mary Ellen Allen for years. I've known Frank Friday for many years. They're consummate professionals. I don't know a single person in this state, Democratic or Republican, the governor, me, any member of this bipartisan board, any one of the clerks or their bipartisan staff that wants to suppress any voter, that wants to disenfranchise anybody. The reason we're all breaking our backs here is to make sure that we do ensure the franchise, but we also keep people safe. I do have 3 very quick questions for you, Clerk Holzclaw. First of all, I think I understood you to say that there's voting both at the Fair and Expo Center and also at your main office.
Well, it's at the Edison, what's called the Edison Center, Secretary Adams. That is where our election center is, and it's on 6th and Ormsby.
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify for folks watching, there are actually 2 locations in Jefferson. I understand that's still not very many, but there's not just one location in Jefferson. There are 2. So one is a little closer to downtown and West End. Is that right?
That is correct. And may I say what you pointed out? One of the reasons why we went with one huge location is to be able to do the 6 feet apart. In a small gym, you can't hardly do that. Or in a regular sized gym, it's almost impossible when you're talking about as many people as we are. So in going to the Fair and Exposition Center, we are able to try to control that more there because of how big it is. So I think that's a plus for that.
That's a really good point. It's the meme is Home Depot. Well, we don't have Home Depots everywhere in Kentucky, and Home Depot is busy being Home Depot. They can't be a voting location. When you actually look at the logistics on the ground of having people in and out of a building, it's very complicated. It's not just a Democratic governor that wants social distancing. It's also a Republican president. The president's White House guidance is to avoid crowds of 10 or more and have people spaced apart. So there's no partisanship in what's being done here. It's good people doing their best under difficult circumstances. I do have 2 very, very quick questions. Number one, I thought I heard you say that a problem you've had in having more locations is a lack of funding. I do believe that we have funding available at the board. I don't want to speak for the board and our budget, but I do think that we have resources available if counties do need resources. We've already appropriated funds to help pay poll workers and so forth. So if that's an issue, let's talk offline and see if we can possibly address that. And then last question is the same one I had for Clerk Blevins, which is how many people do you estimate are going to vote in person in Jefferson County?
You're speaking to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Right now we're preparing on election day for the primary to turn out to be approximately 30,000. That is what we're preparing for. Now, whether that is the number, could be 130,000. It could be 3,000. Nobody has any idea. I can only go by the number of applications that we're receiving, and they are much more than they've ever been, which is a good thing. Which is a really good thing for us.
I think you can probably handle 30,000. Can you handle 50 or 100 or 150? I don't think you'll have that many, but how many do you think you can handle in person?
Well, we're going to handle whatever is dealt to us. We're going to handle it. Is it going to be easy? No, it's not. And is there going to be a wait? There will be. But that is why we're asking everybody to use the mail-in. There is no perfect solution to all of this. There's no right, there's no wrong. Whatever comes out there, we're going to do our level best to make sure that they're able to vote, no matter how late that goes into whatever. we're trying to make it available so that everybody can vote. I'm just thankful, Secretary Adams, that this is not November. Because if it was November, I can't even fathom.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments.
I think this is an appropriate time for me to reemphasize the fact that every single registered Kentucky voter has the right to vote at home. And we encourage all of those voters to vote at home. So I want to just emphasize that again and again and again. Please vote at home if you can.
Chairman,
Thank you so much for that.
Yes, Clerk Blevins.
I just wanted to respond to one of the remarks the Secretary had made. I appreciate the fact that the board has given us some money already and stands ready to aid if necessary, assuming you have more funds, but it's too late. There will be no more changes. This is what we're going to do. No more changes. We can't accommodate it at all. So know that this is it. That's all. Thank you.
All right, we have, yes, Jared.
Not to add, I just wanted to make sure, because I know there are a lot of people calling about Jefferson County, and I am in regular conversation with Mary Ellen Allen, who is Clerk Holsclaw's deputy, and is doing an amazing job for her. I think it's important also to note that they have been in communication. Please, Clerk Holsclaw, tell me if I'm wrong, but that they've been in communication with TARC to provide extra bus lines, to be able to provide transportation for individuals that might not have the ability to be able to transport themselves to the exposition center. And I think that's a really good proactive way of meeting a lot of the challenges, and shows the good faith and goodwill that Clerk Holsclaw has shown for her county and her diligence in making sure that everyone has access to the ballot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you, Clerk Holsclaw. Now I'd like to call on Clerk Gabrielle Summey from Northern Kentucky, from Kenton County, our third largest county.
Hi, how are you all? Thank you for having us today. I think it's important that people hear why we've made decisions that we've made. And I became a lawyer because I never wanted to do math in my life. And then there's election math, which is another thing. And just to start with numbers, because that speaks to a lot of the issues that we're having, as well as perspective. I have about 137,000 registered voters. If 50%, because I don't have any nonpartisan races, if 50% of voters turn out, that's about 60,000 ballots. If 25%, it's about approximately close to 30,000. So that being said, I'm already at about 10,000. And now, mind you, it's really hard for me to kind of determine what will happen on election day, because in 2016, which what I would base my numbers on, we had 17% turnout. But we also had a presidential caucus, because Rand Paul was also on the ballot and he was also in a caucus. So it's hard for me to kind of figure out my percentages of what to prepare for, because those numbers are going to be different. That's kind of a unique situation. So I'm preparing for, believe it or not, I'm using the convention center in Covington. And again, my county board, the county clerks are having our board's decisions together. We're not unilaterally coming up with all these things. We're doing a lot of the heavy lifting and going to them and saying, you all need to hear what we're doing. You're part of this decision-making process, and they are. So that being said, we picked a convention center, which is in Covington, and given the unique geography of, well, every county, but mine is very long. I have an inner city, I have a big suburb, and then I have a rural county. Now, we picked the inner city because we felt like that gave people an opportunity to, one, it was the largest place I could find. All the reasons for one single location stand true for Kenton County. But I also was able to do a couple of things by picking that location. It's across from the Home Depot, from the bus depot, and our tank, which is our local, transit, is offering free rides. Our county garage is right there. They're giving free parking. The city of Covington is participating and allowing all of their parking garages to be open and free as well. We felt like that gave those people an opportunity. And yes, there's a lot of people in the south of the county, but a lot of them do have cars. And I know it's not a perfect situation, but that was also taken into consideration at the time. And one person said one time, well, why don't you have more precincts? And I thought their answer was, another clerk said this. They said, well, I have every home's a precinct. So I have basically 137,000 precincts in Kenton County right now. And this is unprecedented. And I wish that people would take the opportunity. Yes, I don't want this to happen in the fall. I don't think anybody wants it to happen that way. But this is a unique situation, and I really encourage all those people to take this opportunity. Now, as I was speaking numbers, part of the reason it's hard for me to tell you where I'm at right now, because 10,000 is very low for Kenton County, is because my postcards haven't hit my neighborhoods yet. I've been doing as much advertising as I possibly can. I have, the fiscal court has an IT person and a social media person. They've been very helpful. My TBNK, which is my, local board for, the community access, they've been putting stuff out there, all my cities. So on top of what's been going on, I've delayed our even review of our ballots until June 4th, because I had a deadline for 20 cities yesterday, plus school boards in the conservation district, for them to put in all of their paperwork. So that takes a lot, especially when I looked at about over 250 filings that I had to process and make sure came in timely yesterday. So I only say that because also my fiscal court decided to open the building on June 1st. So I've logistically had to create special lines for my auto, for my record room, my real estate. So yes, my staff, which prior to this have all been elections all the time, are now back in their seats working on other things. And I keep harvesting them here and there to do things. Having a really difficult time finding enough people to work on election day. Actually had 50 people as of yesterday, and 5 of them called back today and went, yeah, we're reconsidering, I've got somebody in my family who, I don't want to expose. So whatever the reasons are, they are, we're calling a lot of more people today. Besides that, I know that I am also just to give you my plan. So June 8th through the 22nd, people will be able to come into my physical location, which is our new building at 1840 Simon Kenton Way. I chose that for the in-person absentee because all my people, when they built this building, were all behind glass. So that makes it easier, a little bit easier for my staff to do that. We did do appointments only. I do not have a whole lot of appointments. If I did do them a 5 apiece, it would only accommodate from that time frame, and including Saturday hours, about 1,043 people. If somebody shows up, I'm not going to turn them away, even if they don't have an appointment. But my staff has to be working the phones, getting these ballots out. So also having 4 people in the front line, just, having people walk in, that takes them away from getting ballots out to people who've gone through the portal. I will be hoping to hire some more people, but I have to tell you, a lot of people who I would normally have reached out to have gone back to work, or they're making more money on unemployment. So a lot of them are saying no to me based on those issues as well. Right now, the other issue that I think a lot of people don't understand is, well, why can't you have it at school? Why can't you have it? Those places are closed. They're under other rules. Yes, by Kentucky statute, they do not, they can't say no to us normally, but based on what's going on, churches, they're closed due to this. They're not necessarily wanting to be open. Some of the locations that are neither, my nursing homes are closed. And based on the executive order, you can't use them. So I think a lot of people just think that you can put back in place what would normally be the norm, and it just can't happen. Because people don't want to be open or available for being used as a polling location, and 2, there's no time. So that was part of our decisions for 1. The other thing that is going to be really interesting is I don't know if the postcards hit tomorrow or the next day, what that volume is going to look like. I have drop boxes. We've been trying to get people to utilize that as well because timing issues. Because if my postcards don't hit till this weekend, they really only have about a week before I can get all of this out. Then take time and get it all the way back in. So that's just going to be a huge challenge for Kenton County. As far as the convention center on election day, I'm actually planning for basically 30,000 people to walk through the doors because if they don't get this postcard in a timely fashion, but again, I wish I had my magic 8 ball. I don't. It's very hard for me to figure out what that will look like, planning for it to be massive. So that being said, I have about 100 people that I'm hoping to have work that day. We have 30 tables for check-in. We have a special room completely for handicap accessible, which if anybody's been in the Northern Kentucky Convention Center or any convention center, they usually have a special location, a special door. So for the handicap accessibility, so we're going to have them there. I'm hopefully, I don't know if the guard will be able to help me. I've requested for them to be there, but given other situations that are happening in the world, they're pretty busy. So that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to have people directing, and we'll have only 5 people in line. We're marking off the floor. We have just a bank area where people will be able to vote. We're going to be using a lot of clipboards so people can walk around and get away from each other. We have separated out our provisional ballot table as well as our spoiled ballot table, so there's no confusion over if they need a new ballot, they'll go to a specific station. People can keep track of that. So it'll be one for the Democratic spoiled ballots, another one for the Republican spoiled ballots, and the provisional. And then we'll have just a bank of scanners, and then they'll be able to walk out a different door so that we're trying to keep people from crossing each other. That's kind of what we're planning for. I hope it works well. I mean, I've prepared my staff. My staff always works election day. They will do so again. Again, I have everybody answering the phones as much as possible. And I don't know if I can add anything else other than the fact that I will likely also be sued for only having one polling location, which is fine. This particular situation has brought to light a lot of people's misunderstanding primaries are in Kentucky. So that being said, it is a party preference closed primary. So I get a little concerned when people are telling me there's somebody stealing the vote and there's all this fraud. Well, you're only accusing the people in your own party of that particular situation. And I get that people don't like the mail, and I'm concerned about the mail too because of the time, and that's why the drop boxes were so important. But you know, their general elections are really the only thing covered by our Constitution. So the fact that we put on these elections, that's great. But I think if I do get sued based on this, I mean, I don't know what to say other than the parties had an opportunity to have a caucus like we had in 2016, those kind of things. And again, I'm just giving you all the facts. I kind of, when I put together election day, went to all those people, the convention center, who are giving me their space for free, Tank and all them, and said, look, let's just make this an awesome community event that people are really getting an opportunity to vote. As long as we can pull this off, that's great. And again, we will accommodate anything that's coming. You guys just wanted to hear from us about our challenges, and that's what the challenge is. And so I just wanted to let you all know, I know that there have been people who've contacted me about this lawsuit. And so if it does happen, I will just let the board know what's happening.
Thank you very much. What we're talking about today, and we've got the clerks from our 3 largest counties with us today, are what amounts to contingency plans that they have for election day. And I say contingency plans because the board is encouraging and requesting every single Kentucky voter to vote at home. If you can vote at home, please do. It's easy to do, and every single voter in Kentucky is eligible to do so. I don't think we can say that too often. So I want everybody to understand that everybody is eligible to vote at home, and we encourage you to do so. It will save a lot of trouble for everybody if everybody does. Now, does anybody have any questions for Clerk Summy?
Chairman
can I ask-
Chapman.
Yes,
Go
Clerk,
ahead, James.
Member James Lewis.
Yes, I just wanted to say, because I'm familiar with what's going on with the election process, that county clerks are showing how resilient and adaptable they are and how dedicated they are to their jobs, all 120 of them, in a very difficult situation. As Clerk Hoslaw said earlier, you need a year to prepare for an election, and we've got just a very short period of time. So I think they're doing a very, very good job at adapting to what's been dealt them. And I would have to applaud all county clerks for their effort in being willing to make this election the best that it can be under the circumstances.
Thank you, James. For those of you who don't know James Lewis, he is a former county clerk from Leslie County in Eastern Kentucky, served many years there, and does know what it's like to hold an election. Thank you, James. Mr. Secretary, did you have a question?
Thank you. Just real quick, Gabe answered my question. I asked other two clerks. I don't have any questions for Gabe, but I do have a question for Clerk Blevins. Looking at the statistics of the various counties and their incoming requests for absentee ballots, right around Frankfort, there's a really high turnout of requests. Franklin County has 23% of voters, registered voters, requesting an absentee ballot. It's similarly high in Fayette, Woodford, Franklin, Madison. The Lexington region showing really strong turnout, which I think is great news because it's going to mean shorter lines on election day. But in Jefferson and in Kenton, at least so far, it's more like 8% as opposed to 18 or 20%. Just making up a number out of thin air, let's assume that 25% of voters participate. If 18%, like in Fayette, are voting absentee, then you're only going to have 7% of registered voters at the sites, and that's going to be very manageable. My question is, because the postcards have landed in the Lexington area, I know that from several people telling me that they've landed in Fayette and Madison and Franklin and Woodford and so forth, and they haven't landed in Jefferson or in Kenton. Did you, Clerk Blevins, did you see a big uptick in the requests for absentee ballots once those postcards landed?
Yes. So that's exactly the problem. The fact that the postcards haven't landed in those other counties is why they're not seeing their big spikes yet. The very first weekend after the portal was open, we got about 15,000 ballot requests. It quieted down and seems to run about 3,000 to 4,000 a day under normal circumstances. Late last week is when the postcards hit Lexington, and then over the weekend I got another 11,000 requests. So you're going to get a pretty good bump in both Jefferson and Kenton once people get those postcards.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions for Clerk Summy? All right, hearing none. We also have Renisa Abner with us from the great Western Kentucky County of Henderson. And Renisa is the president of the County Clerks Association. And Renisa, I'd like to give you the opportunity to make any comments or to also tell anybody who might be viewing what you're doing in Henderson County.
Well, first off, thank you, Mr. Chandler. Here in Henderson, we have started to see an increase in our requests. We don't have the turnout as far as requests that Clerk Blevins does at this point. But I hope to, once the postcards have hit here, they haven't been in the mailboxes yet here. I hope that our turnout increases, similarly. And I just want to say I have a lot of respect for Clerk Blevins, Hoslaw, and Summy. I mean, I know what we're doing here. And I can't imagine, I have 36,000 registered voters. And so my hat's off to them, completely respect them for all they're dealing with. And also, I just wanted to reiterate, I agree with Bobby Holzclaw in that, the messaging has to be the same from the top to the county level. If we're to be successful with this in the tools that we're given, the time frame we're given, we have to all be messaging the same way. And that's to focus on the at-home voting. It has to be that way, or it's not going to be successful. So I just wanted to reiterate that, because we have to be unified. The board, Secretary Adams, all the clerks, we all have to be unified in this to make it successful. And we do feel the support. We feel the support from the board, and Secretary Adams, we do feel it in the decisions you've made, the funding you've made available, but we do have to be on the same page. And sometimes I don't see that. We just have to message that this is the safest way, this is the best way, this is what we, our leaders agreed that this is how it's to be done. And so we all need to get on this same page and make sure we're giving the message to the voters so they can choose this option. They feel good about it. They want to do it because it's the best way and it's the only successful way for us to all be, together on this.
Thank you, Clerk Abner. Does anybody have any questions for Clerk Abner?
Sorry to be that guy. I do have a question if I can.
Yes.
First, Renisa, thank you for your comments. I agree 100%. I've been on the same page with Governor Beshear and with the board, encouraging people, letting them know that there are multiple options to vote. We haven't taken anyone's rights away and wouldn't do that, but we are strongly encouraging people to vote absentee if they possibly can, to make the process not just safer for them and more convenient for them, but for the poll workers and the clerks and everybody. Here's my question. I do probably, as I said, 5 or 6 of these a day with media, with civic organizations and so forth, explaining what we're talking about today, encouraging people to vote absentee. I feel like that message is landing in the urban areas, or at least in Lexington and Louisville. I feel like people are seeing the TV interviews and maybe they're a little more online than say in some of the rural areas, and they're seeing social media from my office and elsewhere. They're seeing the governor's press conferences where he plugs the govoteky.com website. But I sense a real disconnect with rural voters based on the calls. I get hundreds of angry calls a day, and they tend to be largely from the rural areas because there's a lack of information. I certainly won't discount that vote fraud is a real thing. I think we've got great controls to prevent it in this election. But I will say that the biggest concern I have in this election is not vote fraud, it's voter confusion. And so my question is, do you have any suggestions, especially in Western Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, places that are kind of outside the Golden Triangle, maybe not as plugged into Frankfort? Do you have any suggestions about how we can get that message out better about how to vote and how this is the best answer?
Well, I know I have received several emails from clerks that were waiting for today to make sure that their plan was actually voted on and accepted by the board, to make sure that their plans wouldn't be changing in any way. And I know, and I give credit, a lot of credit to Jerry Deering, because, initially I was going to have everything in my courthouse, including Election Day. And he kind of gave us some guidance as to, plan for these numbers and what will your location handle these numbers on Election Day if, it just depends on the turnout, as far as how many people are applying through the portal. So can you, accommodate this amount of people? And I realized, and as I think a lot of clerks did, that we couldn't. And so we actually changed our location on Election Day to our high school to be able to accommodate, the right amount of people. So, I give him a lot of credit in guiding us and giving us those scenarios and all that information, because, like everybody has said, we've never done this before. So, we have made changes here in Henderson. So I think a lot of the advertising that some of the county clerks are doing was dependent on this decision today before they put that out in the media. But, I'm just going to encourage all the clerks to, I have a local radio station here, and I'm getting ready to get on in the next couple of days to do a second broadcast through my radio station, just to reach out to any avenue that you have, Facebook. Yesterday, I did a video on how to actually fill out an absentee ballot. And Gabe had shared with me, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, that she had created one similarly, and I just modeled it after her. So I think, the clerks sharing information as far as, what we are putting into place to help our communities be more informed about the process is a good way to do that. But, that's kind of what we're doing here. Reach out to our newspapers and TV stations as best you can.
Thank you. And I might add that some of the folks in the rural areas, in particular, older folks who tend to be the strongest voting group, read newspapers. So we ought to be getting the message out through local newspapers throughout the state as well. Maybe even taking some ads out in those newspapers to make sure that they know.
Yes, the state board, we, like I said, we feel your support. But, that is a good way. I know you're sending out the postcards, but also, like, if there is some kind of campaign that can, be standardized. I know you can't say each county's in-person locations, and send that out in a broad way, but also just the messaging of govoteky.com, and just scream that.
Mainly, that's what we want to advertise. And if I haven't
Yes.
said this before, I'll say it again. We encourage every single voter in Kentucky to vote at home. Every voter is eligible to do that. With that, I'm going to move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is to hopefully approve the 120 county contingency plans for election day. We recognize, and I certainly recognize, that each and every clerk in this state understands their own particular circumstances in their counties a whole lot better than the members of the state board do. And consequently, we have gone to great lengths, and the staff has gone to great lengths, as Clerk Abner mentioned, to work with the county clerks to try to give what advice we could give to them to get these plans in place. And we have gone to great lengths to essentially realize that you all have your own particular circumstances. So I hope that we can approve the plans that you all have put forward, again, with a whole lot of contact between the staff and the clerks in the last couple of weeks to get those plans finalized. We have a list of what all of the clerks in the 122 counties are planning to do. The board has that list. Hopefully all of you have it in front of you. And I would accept a motion now to approve those plans in total, in mass, if anybody would like to make that motion.
Mr. Chairman, it's George
Yes.
Russell. Each county clerk, as you've said, knows their county situation. Certain counties are even doing early voting, in-house early voting. They think they need that. So yes, I make the motion to approve the 120 county plans that have been submitted.
Thank you, Member Russell. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Member Sears. We've got a motion and a second to approve the 120 county plans. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Shannon?
Yes, Director Deering.
Just for the board's context, some of the things that we've done from the staff's perspective to make sure that counties are ready and that we can provide the board with some context and some actual data so that you're not basing these on an intuition. We've provided the board with potential turnout rates. We've tried to base those a little higher than what we actually think they could be. We've discussed with every county has submitted their full plan of where their locations will be. Once the board approves those, we will place those on our website. So that way anyone from any county can log in. They'll be able to pinpoint their county and understand where those locations will be. But we also, and thank you, Clerk Abner as well. I really appreciate your comments. But I think it's important to understand that the clerks are doing something that they've never done before. This is brand new to all of them. And I think that they're trying to make decisions based on the conditions on the ground in their own county. Some counties have a little more resources and a little more access to be able to do some really creative things. And I've seen some really amazingly creative ideas from a lot of clerks. But at the end of the day, we've asked them to all be able to provide us some context that they have the capacity to fulfill not only their mail-in side, but also on election day, that the individuals that do show up, that we'll be able to handle the potential turnout. Clerk Sumi, we talked a couple weeks ago, and she's doing something really great, which is she's utilizing a convention center, much like Jefferson County is. And the benefit there is that they can then expand out if we start to see turnout rates as we get closer to the elections, kind of like weather. 4 weeks out, I can kind of guess what the weather might look like, but it's not going to really be accurate. As we get closer to the election, we'll be able to provide the clerks more context and a model of what their actual potential turnout might look like. And then that way, as long as they have contingency plans of being able to scale out if necessary, we're asking them to all prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And that way, if we do have large turnouts, they'll still be able to accommodate them. It's not going to be easy for anyone, but that they will be able to accommodate those voters. And hopefully they have too many poll workers, too large of an area to vote in, and more resources at hand on election day than they need. And then we have a really light turnout and everyone takes advantage of voting through the portal. But in the worst case scenario, they will have the ability to be able to push through as many of those voters as they can, as long as those voters are patient with them and work in a way to make sure that everyone has a constitutional right to cast their ballot.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you for all of the work that you and your staff have done on this. Do we have any other discussion?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jared, thanks for all your hard work. Gosh, going back to, I think, early March on all this stuff. I want to clarify something that you said. I've got the chart in front of me. I don't think that that folks watching necessarily have this document in front of them, but just to clarify, in going through the county plans and assessing the capacity to handle the in-person proportion of people voting, what turnout projection did you use? 10%, 20%? It says 10 to 20% on the chart, but as you're looking at these,
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's so the models, just so everyone knows how we were basing those models. So one, we took historical context of previous election cycles, both primaries and generals, as well as the 2016 and the 2012 elections. We based kind of what potential turnout could be in those models, and then moved it into this cycle. And what we've looked at is we're telling clerks to prepare for 50% total turnout across the state. And for context, we had less than 20% in the 2016 election. I believe it was closer to 18% statewide. Again, Clerk Sumi had said that there were some other factors in play that decreased the turnout. But even going back to 12, we don't see a context where anything in the state's been much higher than 25% in number of years for primary elections. So that being said, we based it on 50%, which is well above what we think it's going to be. And then we told the clerk to prepare for roughly 25% of that number to be on election day. Now, we don't think that's going to be the case. We also don't think it's going to be the case that 50% will show up. But we want to be prepared. And so I think that's I was speaking to a clerk just a couple of days ago, and I said, what an amazing day it's going to be when you have 50 poll workers and 20 e-poll books and all this extra staff and 500 people show up. That is going to be an incredibly easy election day, and you will go away thinking that's the best election day you've ever had. But that's probably not going to be the reality. But I also don't necessarily think it's going to top out at the highest numbers that we see and have modeled for. So again, we're trying to really push clerks into thinking that the projections, they need to be on the high side, but hope for the best on the actual turnout. Now, as we get closer to the election, several of the things that we've done is we will take the portal requests as we get closer, and we'll be able to determine what by party affiliation, how many people have applied by percentage. And if there is a shortfall in one party or the other, we'll be able to kind of gauge, one, that the shortfall will more than likely show up on election day. So one, that will be part of the model. Two is that we're going to go in and look at all the voters, what we call 4x5s and 5x5. So individuals who have voted in 5 of the last elections and 4 of the 5 last elections. If those individuals have not applied by the absentee portal, we can make a fair assessment that they will show up on election day as well. So we'll take that into context, but we need more people to come in through the portal. And as those numbers start to solidify, we can really kind of refine our modeling and then continue to notify the clerks of that.
Your projection for the in-person proportion is one quarter of 1/2, which I think is 1/8 or about 12.5%.
Exactly.
So on average, and I understand it's going to differ in different counties.
Yes.
Some have hot races locally and some don't. But on average, our premise is that we think 12.5% of all registered voters will vote in person. Is that right?
Yeah. And of the turnout itself, of all ballots cast, 25% roughly will be in person. And we've one of the other things we've done is we've looked at other states in the last several months that have had their elections to see how their turnout has come out, including Nebraska and Illinois, Ohio, Oregon just recently had theirs as well. And so we're trying to use those as models to try to predict and make some analysis that's data driven and not just kind of an intuition thing.
Yeah, I want to just add a quick point and then I give it back. What we're doing in this election is exactly what Indiana did in their election yesterday, exactly what Pennsylvania did in their election yesterday. What we're doing, what the governor and I proposed and this board accepted and standardized is not something that was invented out of thin air. Something that was already precedented by other states that have managed to find a way to conduct elections successfully and not unduly risk harm to the public. So we do, I think, in this plan have many fewer voting locations proportionally compared to what Indiana had yesterday and Pennsylvania. I think we have probably too few. But that said, what we're doing as a model is well precedented and has worked very well in other states.
Very good. Anybody else have anything they want to add on this or discuss before we move to a vote to approve the county plans? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the 120 county plans, please vote aye.
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 Anybody against? Vote nay. Hearing none, it passes. The county plans are approved. Wonderful. Now we move to the next item on the agenda. Mr. Secretary, you're the next item on the agenda as usual. You've probably already said most of what you want to say, but if you'd like to tell every voter that they have the right to vote at home, you're more than welcome to do that.
I do that several times a day. That's my full-time job right now. I've already spoken plenty. I don't have a whole lot more to add other than I just want to reiterate what I'm using my platform to do right now is, as I said earlier, to get this message out to as many parts of the state as I can. I've done a lot of Zooms with chambers of commerce around the state, with civic organizations around the state, public organizations. We're on message. We're encouraging people. The first thing I think is very important is explaining that we haven't taken anyone's rights away. We're not suppressing voters. Until people understand that you're not adverse to them, they won't listen to what you have to say. I've had that experience. I found that the resistance to this approach has dissipated quite a bit over the past month as I've changed my own messaging to starting first with some of the mistaken perceptions about the election. People thinking that we've completely eliminated in-person voting. People think that we actually are voting online as opposed to getting absentee ballots online. There's been a lot of misconceptions I've had to address, a lot of misinformation. probably not badly intended, it's just wrong information on social media. So I think that we'll see a successful election, but let's just be real about this. There's human error in every election. We had human error in elections before coronavirus, and now we're suddenly moving to a much different system on very short notice, and the voters are just learning about it as they get their postcards. So I asked the public to give us a chance here, be patient with us. We're certainly doing our best under difficult circumstances, and everybody is working in good faith across party lines.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Deering, you're next on the agenda. I suspect that you've also said most of what you want to say, but if you've got anything else to add, please do.
I can keep it short if you want, or I also have a kind of itemized list of some of the things the staff has done to kind of prepare for this, to give you an idea of kind of what's been moved and the kind of the magnitude, which I think might be helpful for people to understand that, like, the election system is not a speedboat. It's more like a cargo ship. You've got to plan months ahead, miles ahead before you make any turns or make any stops. And so if I could just take a brief moment to kind of give a rundown of kind of some of the things that we've done and maybe some numbers on the portal itself. So let me start with that. Right now, we have, as of this morning, rolled over 300,000 ballot applications on the absentee portal. And that's, a little over a week of usage. We had, prior to the portal going up, a little less than 100,000 absentee applications come in through the old system. So that means in total, we're a little over 400,000 ballots cast on, or ballots applied for on the absentee portal. In context, in the 2016 election, we had a little over 600,000 total ballots cast in the election itself. So with several weeks to go, we're still on target to surpass that. That being said, one of the things I know the board's interest was is making sure that we are on a voter verified paper audit trail system. We have purchased over 74 VVPAT compliant voting systems, both ES&S and HART InterCivic systems. We've purchased 57 ES&S DS200 ballot scanners, 2 ES&S DS450s, which are the very large machines that help some of our larger counties, 27 HART InterCivic ballot scanners, 21 ES&S secure result stations. We've purchased over 275,000 extra ballots for counties to make sure that they have enough ballots on hand on election day. We have purchased over 300,000 pens, and we shipped those out this last week. I thought it was important to be able to give every voter their own pen that did show up for in-person voting, and that way it would decrease the transmission rate for having to clean pens and pass those between voters. Those have all gone out, and some have already arrived in county. We have shipped out over 300 computers to the counties, specifically through our partnership with COT. They pulled out 300 plus computers at no cost for us out of surplus. And we are now using 300 scanners attached to those computers, helping with the tracking of absentee ballots as they go out of the system and come back into the system. We have procured and shipped 175 secure drop boxes. It's my understanding that all of them have arrived in the counties at this point. We have purchased 1.7 million security envelopes, 1.7 million inner envelopes, 1.7 million outer envelopes, and those have all been shipped and delivered. For the most part, those all were delivered with little pain, but there were a couple of counties where the shipping and routing companies had some issues getting those to the counties, but those are all in county now and ready to be used. We have had over 10 statewide conference calls for question and answers for the clerks that range between an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, with an average of about 150 deputy clerks on them on a regular basis. We've actually held 3 Zoom training calls to go over specific balloting accountability processes and how to utilize the ballot scanners and VRS Lite. We have ordered over 300,000 sheets of envelope labels for the counties to be able to use for their voters. Every county will now be on e-poll books for this election, which will be a good opportunity for us to be able to see how things are operating on election day and seeing those voters and how turnout is kind of manifesting on election day. That being said, the one thing I did want to note was that we ordered and printed 3.4 million postcards. Again, I want to reiterate that, because we're a large process, this is not something that's an incredibly nimble system. It's very large in its scope and its scale. And so the day that the board gave me permission to start to purchase a lot of the supplies and equipment, I did so. And because it takes time for a lot of our vendors to accumulate both the supplies needed and actually to complete this, the process is not as fast as we would want it, but it is getting completed. So the vendor that we're using for our postcards has completed the printing of 3.4 million postcards. But to be able to process those effectively, they have gone out on a daily basis for the last week and several days now, with the last cards going out this week. My understanding is that on average, they were sending out a little over 500,000 postcards a day. And that process started on the day the portal went live on that Friday. The majority of the state has now received their postcards, or at least they are in transit to those counties. And we should start to see them arriving in total this week and over the weekend. I would definitely like to thank a couple of people, both the governor and the Secretary of State, and specifically their staff. I know Assistant Secretary Sketchfield has been incredibly helpful, as well as Chief of Staff Buckner and Mark Ferris in the governor's office, who have helped greatly in this process. I'd also like to thank our vendors, both Bluegrass Vending for our printing, ES&S and HARP, as well as the United States Postal Service. They have been an integral partner for us to be able to help facilitate this large lift to make sure that we can get this done. And we're on regular phone calls with them to get this out and done. I will say in last, for some of the numbers, that we've asked the governor's office to supply 10,000 pairs of gloves, 433,000 cloth masks, 5,800 face shields, 800 plexiglass shields, 3,389 gallons of hand sanitizer, and 850,000 disinfectant wipes. Those hopefully should be reaching the counties in as an expedited manner as they possibly can. I know the counties are all working with our emergency managers at the county level and their county health departments. We've sent out that notification, and the governor's office will be pushing that equipment down to those emergency managers and then out to the counties from that venue. One thing I wanted to note was that this election has more security protocols on it than any election I've ever been a part of. We track, I think it's important for people to understand a little bit of what that process is. We've specifically given clerks some training on ballot accountability. So that means that every single mail ballot that is requested through the absentee portal, we track not only the application itself, we're tracking IP ranges and addresses to make sure that when those applications are coming in, we can track to make sure that there's no glut of applications being sent to the same location. And when there is, we look to see what it is. We had one, I know the secretary had mentioned this in another press conference, that we had one recently that had 47 ballots sent to the same address. We looked at it, it was a nunnery in Western Kentucky. So again, we want to make sure the public is aware that we are tracking and making sure that, we are counting for security in whatever way possible. We track not only the application, but then when the ballot is sent out from the county clerk's office to the voter, we track that. We then track the ballot back to the county clerk's office. And then not only when it arrives at the county clerk office, but we also track it through the signature curing process, making sure that every ballot signature is matched and appropriately validated by the signature of record from the clerk, and also opening and then ultimately tallying. And then all those numbers can be audited. And I think that's the important thing to understand is this is a lot like an accounting system where you have input and output, and that you can track all of that through the entire process. This will be one of the most secure elections we've ever had, despite the fact that we've put it up in a matter of months. Despite the fact this is new, it is incredibly important that not only we provide safety to our voters, but that we also can explain to them how this is a secure election. And I think the secretary has done a good job of explaining that. And I know the governor has also mentioned that. So I'd like to thank them for that. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Very good. Thank you for that, Jared. And thank you for all of the work that you have put in, that your staff has put in. I agree. Thank you to the governor, his staff, the Secretary of State, his staff, so many people on the state level, and so many people in all 120 counties and the clerk's offices have been involved in this. It's a tremendous undertaking, as I think anybody listening can gather. So we've done everything I think we can do, and we're moving, in my view, very much in the right direction, and we're very grateful to everybody involved. With that, I'm going to move to you, Renisa, if you've got anything else you want to add. Maybe you also said all that you're going to say, but feel free to add anything else you might want to.
No, I'll reiterate my thanks for all the support that we have received. And, you know, we are doing our very, very best to make this successful. And I know that we can, because we're clerks and we are truly resilient. We deal with so much and so many things, you know, on a daily basis. I have a lot of confidence that we can make this happen. So much respect to all the clerks. I feel it, you know, everybody's feeling the same pain right now. And then also a lot of respect for the State Board of Elections and their staff. And they have been over backwards to help us. They're answering our questions, emails, texts constantly. So I just wanted to end on a positive note. We can do this. We're all together. We're committed, and just stay positive. Thanks.
Wonderful. Very good. Next item on our agenda is other business. Jared, do we have any other business that we need to discuss today?
In general, no. I'd just like to ask the individuals watching that, you know, continue to be patient with your county clerks. They will get these ballots out to you. Some of them will not be overnight. They will not be next day. Some may take upwards of a week or more, but they will come to you. It's important that you just be patient. At that time, you will have more than enough time to be able to cast that ballot effectively. And again, as long as you've placed it in the mail with a June 23rd election date on that, it will be counted appropriately. So we continue to ask you just to work patiently with your county clerks as we move through this process. Other than that, I think we're good, other than closed session for pending legal.
And we will move into that right now. We have some pending legal issues and may also want to take up a security issue or two, and those things have to be done in executive session. So that closed session, we'll have to move into that. If I can get a motion from someone.
Motion.
A motion from Member Whitehouse to move into closed session. Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
A second from Member Russell. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed. All right, we will move into closed session now. We will come back at the end of closed session to ring out, but we don't have any other business to undertake, any other business related to this election to undertake. We're finished with that. So thank everybody for watching. If you want to stay with us, we will be back to close out an open session. But right now we're moving into executive session, and will the members of the board stay in executive session with us?
Thank you, clerks, for being on the call today.
Thank you all. Thank you, clerks, very much.
Opportunity to let you know what was going on. Have a good day.
Thank you.
I'll have Alan pull us out, and then just for the public's notice, we will go back on a second link that will show the conclusion of the meeting. And I believe the only thing on the agenda is to confirm next meeting, which is June 23rd. But we will post that link as soon as we come out of closed session. Give me 1 second if everyone will hold for a minute, and I'll come back and let you know when the closed session.